Brother McLaughlin, first of all, I want to say thank you for joining in on this pastoral interview for our Mission of the Church class. And so really appreciate your time. I know you're very much engaged in the mission of the church there in Euless and all that you're doing, traveling, speaking, engagements, and all that the Lord's using you to do. In fact, you just come out with a new book, Standing Strong in the Storm, exposition of 1st and 2nd Peter. And I've talked to a lot of folks that's read that, and it very much impacted their life. I know from reading it myself, it was pretty impactful. I read it was a year or two ago you come out with that book. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Anyway, so again, I appreciate your time today and joining in on this.
Well, thank you, Brother Renault. Thank you for allowing the opportunity, and I hope that it can be beneficial.
All right. Well, the first question is, Brother McLaughlin, is can you describe the mission of the church and how you have implemented a plan to accomplish this mission in your local assembly?
Absolutely. We have a mission at our particular church that is fourfold: to evangelize the lost, equip the saints, mobilize the ministry, and go by giving. That can be summarized in 4 words: evangelize, equip, mobilize, and give. And it's imperative, however, when a church or a pastor has a mission, that it's also supported with vision and values. So if we're going to take a holistic approach to apostolic revival, I personally believe that there has to be a mission, the vision, and the values of the local assembly. The mission asks the question, why are we here? The vision asks the question, where are we going? And the values ask the question, who are we? And so this creates a church culture. Our church culture is about, again, evangelizing, equipping, mobilizing, and giving. Now, when I meet with all of our departments, everyone answers back to the mission, vision, and values of the church. So there's nothing done. There are no allocations of monies or decisions made that are outside of the scope of the mission, vision, and values of our church.
Okay. So there at your local church, how have you sort of maybe plugged in these things in a way that you have seen that sort of gets the church engaged in accomplishing that?
Sure.
There in your local assembly.
Absolutely. Well, we have what we call the Impact Ministry, and this is a team of those who go consistently out into the community. Part of that is Sunday school evangelism, in which we go into 15 different apartment complexes. We have 2 shuttle buses and a van, and we have 3 routes out of those 15 apartment complexes. And on a weekly basis, we bring in anywhere from the low times, maybe 25, to high times 35 or 40 from the apartment complexes. We've actually won entire families this way. And the beautiful thing is, I know we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, and I think question 2 or 3, but some of those that we actually won from the apartment complex are now bus captains themselves and going back into the apartments. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. So that's one way. Currently, we are going into prisons. We are also holding parenting classes and anger management classes, in which we're working in conjunction with CPS as well as the Tarrant County. And so they are actually sending people to our church.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what are some of the challenges to realizing the mission of the church from your perspective?
Sure. Some of the challenges would be to make sure that we're constantly intentional about developing new leaders, because it's the Pareto principle. You know, you've heard 20% of the people do 80% of the work, and if a church is not careful, that can lead to burnout. And so what we've tried to do is be very proactive and intentional in developing new leaders. And so what I mean by that is typically When we appoint a leader, we will normally appoint someone to assist that person. And that assistant is always learning. So in the event that the main leader is pulled out, that assistant can go right in. That's the biggest challenge, though. And so discipleship is extremely important there, which leads to question number 3. But that's probably the biggest challenge, is making sure that we constantly have new people being mobilized into the ministry.
Okay. And Steve, has your approach to discipling new believers been effective in all these things you're doing, and how so?
Okay, very good question. When a person comes into the church and they're born again, they've received the Holy Ghost, have been baptized in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, and they have a strong desire to get involved, we promote that. And so immediately we enlist them in the Take Root class. Take Root class consists of 10 lessons. This is a material that headquarters and Carlton Kuhn have written. And so they go through the Take Root class. It's mandatory if they want to be in any type of ministry. Following that, they have to agree to the leadership and public ministry guidelines of our church. This holds tenaciously to apostolic distinctives. And so when we disciple, we lead them through that. They actually get a certificate. We have a night of graduation in which we give them that certificate and recognize them in front of the entire church. And so it's a really fun time. And just a little testimony, the other day when we were actually training people to work in the anger management classes, one of our new converts was in there and he said to me, he said, "Pastor, did you notice?" And I said, "Notice what?" He said, 100% of our Take Root class is in here being trained to be mobilized in the ministry. Wow. Yeah, 100% of those that graduated were now in active ministry.
Wow, that's awesome.
That was exciting.
Awesome. I'd say that's pretty effective. 100%.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, my goodness, man, we don't always bat 100%. I mean, definitely there are the stories where they don't pan out, obviously. But I will tell you that being proactive in the Take Root class, this is another way that we involve people. And that is that we have a rotation of teachers. So it's not one person doing all the teaching. Again, our mission is to mobilize ministry and enlist as many people as possible in the ministry that are qualified, that are capable, and that are competent.
Wow. Okay. And Brother McLaughlin, what additional tools, when you think of all the tools that you're currently using, what tools do you think, in addition to those, or if you want to comment further even on the ones you've mentioned, that might be helpful to churches, people, leaders, in reaching, developing, empowering new believers, new converts, folks that are coming in? As they come in, how can we get them, plugged into the mission of the church? And how, what do you think would be maybe the best practices as far as that's concerned from your local respective community?
Sure. One of the things that we did, probably 2 or 3 years ago, is we did what we called sacrifice of time. And we were doing a sacrifice offering, and that was just helping us to facilitate the various ministries. We have 15 departments in the church, and a lot of those have co-leaders. And so we have about 40 to 50 primary leaders in our church. Well, each one has a vision. That means that you've got to have a budget to fuel the vision. And so what we did is we started taking up a sacrifice offering. That money would be allocated to each one of those departments so that they could live out the vision. So I had a gentleman actually come to me and said, "Pastor, what if we do a sacrifice of time?" And this helped tremendously. We immediately got about 40 to 50 new people involved in ministry that was temporary. So this is how it worked. we had a service called Sacrifice of Time. I preached on committing your time to the Lord. And they were able to sign up for, like, say, 20 hours of volunteer time, 30 hours of volunteer time, or 40 hours of volunteer time through an entire year. And so that volunteer time would be plugged in to a ministry that they had a burden for. So they may come along in Sunday school and say, I'm committing to 20 hours, because they may not be ready to make a lifetime commitment. Consequently, what happened is when some jumped into Sunday school, the Lord got a hold of their heart. They never made it to the next ministries that they had volunteered for, because they stuck right there, and they're still teaching today. And so that was really helpful, because as a pastor, then you bang your head against the wall. How do I get more people involved? Well, what if I ask them and it's a wrong fit? You know, what if I ask them and they feel out of compulsion to do it for me and not the Lord? And so this created a venue where there was no pressure. It was a win-win. And our prayer was, if they're called and they have a burden, God's going to get hold of their heart and they'll stay involved in that ministry. And it immediately bolstered the manpower. And that was just one way. I mean, there are various tools to implement in a church. And a pastor in a church just has to find out what works best for them in their particular context.
Well, in addition to that, Brother McLaughlin, I understand you also have leadership development and things of that nature for new believers. And what's sort of your process to kind of get them involved with that? Sure.
What we do, we have what's called next level leadership, and we do that on Sunday mornings, and it's open to those who, again, it's going back to equipping the church, which is part of our mission. This is why we're here. And so we equip them with leadership principles. We equip them with doctrinal and theological principles, so that they are founded in the apostolic identity. And from that teaching, it develops them into a well-rounded saint of God who is armed to do the will of God. And so typically what happens is when that knowledge comes, it lights a fire in them, and automatically they start looking for opportunities to be involved. And so we're very proactive in our development. Also, those that feel called to preach, we're very proactive there. We have the Timothy group, in which they carry out a lot of ministry responsibilities in the church. And also they do word studies, and they have to write and come back and present that, and then have dialogue based on what they've written. And so it's just more of a proactive, intentional way to develop them.
Wow. Brother McLaughlin, we got just maybe 2 minutes left, and would there be anything that you'd like to maybe share with the class that, because these are future pastors, some of them are currently engaged in pastoral ministry, that maybe you could kind of share from your heart to them about the mission, maybe a word of encouragement, just whatever you might feel.
Sure. I think the church has to consist of education, empowering, and evangelism. There has to be leadership praxis. In other words, it's got to leave the Sunday school room, the sanctuary, and it's got to get into the streets. Otherwise, we're this think box of information with no spiritual transformation. And education theologically must lead to spiritual transformation. So the word educate comes from a Latin word, or the Latin word for educate is ducere. And it literally means to pull out or to draw out. Oftentimes we've thought in terms of Christian education as pouring information into the next generation, when really it's pulling potential out of them. So our paradigm of educating, preaching, and teaching must think in terms of, I am reaching into a gold mine of the next generation. I am pulling potential out of them, creating pathways by virtue of the mission of the church that enables them to propel the church into heights that we've never tapped into. But there's got to be a vision from the pastor and from our generation that sees potential in them and pulls it out of them. We can do it. Let's do it together.
Let's do it. Awesome, Brother McLaughlin. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you jumping on here with us and sharing all these things with the class. And I have no doubt it'll be a tremendous blessing to all of us. And so anyway, thank you again, Brother McLaughlin.
Thank you, Brother Noel. God bless.
God bless.